For 25 years, the Philadelphia Flyers have taken us on a glorious journey and built a legacy of pride and tradition. This is their story.
Tries to Clark. Shot! Oh! Rebound! Score! Bobby Clark! It's all over. The Flyers have won the second in a row. The Flyers. Leaks going to the back end. Going for five. Goal! Frankie Leaks 5-0!
If I had my choice, I'd love to do it over again.
Into the corner to Eklund. Straight out in front to Pop. Bruins come back. Puts it from their side and center in on Hextall. He blocks, looks to shoot it to the open net. He has scored!
In my heart, I was, I am, and I always will be a Philadelphia Flyer.
Blocked by Coolin. Into the slot to Tocchet. Side of the net. Score!
The Spectrum. It is the stage that echoes a quarter century of glory. The Flyers' magnificent championship tradition was built on the vision, determination, and hard work of a young executive named Ed Snider, who 25 years ago drafted a proposal that was destined to bring professional hockey to the city of Philadelphia.
I was young and full of enthusiasm, and I had seen hockey and loved it. And I had seen, its success in the 6 cities that had it, but I really didn't analyze the history of hockey in Philadelphia or in other places. And possibly, if I had, I would have never done it. So when I look back upon when we first wanted to borrow the money and we were going around to all the banks, one banker fell asleep while we were talking to him. Another, when we were all through, said, I don't think soccer is going to make it in this town. I mean, they weren't even listening to us, hardly.
Despite the cold reaction, Ed Snider pressed on. Finally, on February 9th, 1966, Philadelphia was one of 6 new U.S. cities to be awarded an NHL franchise.
I was a nervous wreck, and I had signed for all kinds of things, and if it didn't succeed, I was history.
Snider was far from being written off as history. The proposal included building a brand new arena, and incredibly, in just over 1 year, the Spectrum was designed, constructed, and open for business. Meanwhile, Bud Poyle, the team's general manager, and Keith Allen, the club's first head coach, were building a hockey team through the NHL expansion draft. Then, on October 11th, 1967, the new Philadelphia Flyers charged into the National Hockey League. Poyle and Allen had built this team from the goal line out. Their first 2 draft picks being goaltenders, Bernie Parent and Doug Favell, both from the Boston Bruins. Also on that first Flyers team was Leon Rochefort, the club's leading scorer, Forbes Kennedy, Ed Van Impe, and number 12, Gary Dornhofer.
We had Bernie Parent and Doug Favell in goal, and they just gave us tremendous goaltending, and we stole a lot of games that we shouldn't have stolen, I think, against the old original 6 teams, and it was fun.
I remember running up and down the chairs, actually, on top of the chairs when there's no one in the seats. There was 5,000 in the building. So during a hockey game, when the rare afternoon games, whenever we could go as kids, we'd be running around the whole building like it was a big playground because there was you weren't in anybody's way.
We saw it slowly building. I think it was Toronto and Chicago on one weekend. We beat them both. More and more people were requesting information about season tickets and season ticket plans. We were gaining recognition, and then the roof blew off.
In March of '68, high winds blew through South Philadelphia and tore off small sections of the Spectrum roof. With several gaping holes in the building's ceiling, the Flyers were left without a home. The team became gypsies, renting out rinks for home games while the Spectrum roof was being repaired. Despite the month-long road trip, the homeless Flyers still managed to finish first, winning the West Division in their very first year. But the rugged St. Louis Blues pounded them out of the playoffs in 1968, and then came back to do the same in '69. The two opening round losses taught the young Flyers franchise a valuable lesson in physical play. In June of 1969, the Flyers took their first step towards glory. Midway through the second round of the NHL draft, a hidden gem, Robert Earl Clark, was drafted. Small, diabetic, and only 19 years old. The youngster from the far reaches of Canada stole the show at his very first training camp.
I remember him stepping on the ice, and at the end of the first practice session, it was obvious he was our best player. I mean, you knew it right away. He just did so many things well. He was so competitive, and you knew that, you know, he was, if anybody was going to lead us to the promised land, this was going to be the kid.
You know, everybody kind of took him under their wing. You know, gee, we better watch this kid. And nobody really knew what kind of heart that Clarkie had at that time. And I think he just developed over that first year as such a strong individual, and he would do anything to win. And I think he really rubbed off on the other players, and he, you know, the other players drew from Bobby even in his rookie year.
Bobby Clark was born to win. He was driven. His choir boy smile hid his fierce passion to be the best.
From the time I was just a kid, a young kid, I wanted to get the skates on, I wanted to go on the ice, I wanted to be part of a team, I liked the locker room. The whole life was right for me. And when I went on the ice, I never thought I worked hard. That was just the way I played the game.
By 1971, Keith Allen had been elevated to GM, and young Bobby Clark was leading the team in goals, assists, and points. But despite his inspiring play, the 71-72 season ended in heartbreak. Going into the final game against the Buffalo Sabres, the Flyers needed only a tie to gain a playoff spot. With just 4 seconds to go in the game and the score tied at 2 apiece, the Flyers' hopes for the postseason crumbled before them.
He shoots. He scores! Gary Meehan!
The last-second elimination was not the first time the Flyers were tortured at season's end. Ed Snyder recalls the '68 playoffs.
St. Louis just, you know, out-muscled us and brutalized us. I'll never forget there was a fight at the Spectrum in which Noel Picard sucker punched Claude Laforge. He never played again in the NHL, and he just came from behind, and he went down a pool of blood, and I wasn't used to that type of thing. And I basically made up my mind at that time and told our people, we may not be able to come up with the great skaters and the great shooters and the real great talents because we were an expansion club and it was going to take us a while. But we could come up with guys that could beat up other guys if that was what was necessary. I don't ever want a Philadelphia Flyer team intimidated ever again.
The Flyers' search for a policeman who would stand up to the outlaws of the NHL ended in '72 when they found their man.
Magnuson at center right. Oh, a tremendous right. Magnuson is getting pummeled. He's getting beat.
Davey Schultz was as important as any other player in our hockey team. Everyone in the Flyer hockey team had a role. It was defined to you, and you had to execute it. No less, no more. I think he was just determined that his role was a policeman, and he was going to be the best at it, and he would do everything possible to be the best.
There was always a player that was the so-called tough guy and was gonna fight. I don't know if anybody took that role to the extreme that I did. I had a guy named Wayne Hillman. He was a journeyman defenseman in the National Hockey League, and he used to say, Schultze, and this is my rookie year, he says, Schultze, I never seen anything like you. Well, I mean, at that point, I'd say, who's next?
Dave Schultz was hockey's Terminator, the game's ultimate enforcer. His sidekick, Bob Kelly, was an out-of-control bowling ball, caroming off bodies in every corner of the rink. Added to the chaos was feisty Don Selesky, thunderous checking Moose DuPont, and quiet tough guy Barry Ashby.
The thing that we had different back in those times, that we had 20 guys went on the ice together, 20 guys left the ice together, and if you beat me, it's no big deal. But as soon as I get out of the box, Schultze's going to run at you. And if you beat Schultze, then Moose will hit you. And, you know, not everybody was as good a fighters ever, but they skated taller and they skated stronger, knowing that there's 20 guys on that ice together.
Born out of necessity, the Hammer and his teammates plundered the badlands of the NHL, earning the nickname the Broad Street Bullies. Allowed to skate unmolested, the highly skilled Flyers began to soar. In 1973, the team captured its first ever playoff series. In the opening round, the Flyers and the Minnesota North Stars were tied at 2 games apiece. The 5th game moved into overtime when Gary Dornhofer skated down the left wing and into Flyers history. The historic goal lifted the Flyers to their first playoff series victory. The play, immortalized in bronze outside the Spectrum, remains as one of the first major steps taken on the Flyers' glorious journey. The Broad Street Bullies became the team's calling card, and once the door was open, the skilled players earned the win. Bobby Clarke set the hard-working standard for the entire team. He became the youngest player in NHL history to be named team captain, and in 1973, he won his first Hart Trophy as the league's MVP. Number 19, Rick McLeish, was the pure skater and scorer who racked up 50 goals in his first full season. And Bill Barber, the team's first-round draft pick in '72, was runner-up for Rookie of the Year.
We could feel ourselves coming, I think. All of a sudden we had some of the top young players in the game on our team, and we felt ourselves that we were extremely well coached.
Fred Shero looked more like an accountant than a hockey coach, but his offbeat approach to the game meshed perfectly with the players on his team.
Freddie Shero was the only coach that could maybe handle our team at the time. He let everybody be themselves, never took away their character, their fun.
He said hockey's a children's game played by men, and if it's a children's game, you ought to have fun. And they had fun at practices. They'd be 12 aside playing with a soccer ball. You know, whoever scored could go in without having to take laps. So you'd have fun with them.
Shero's fun included his famous quotations, written on the locker room blackboard.
I think they registered. They pretended they weren't reading those quotes, but they were reading them. And there were quotes constantly on the blackboard and in their lockers. The quote I like to remember is, take the shortest route to the puck carrier and arrive in ill humor.
Shiro's system was anchored in defense, and the man the Flyers depended on most was goalie Bernie Parent. In 1973-74, the quiet French-Canadian led the league with an incredible 12 shutouts during the regular season. The brilliant play of Parent was the final piece to the Flyers' championship puzzle. They had the toughness, the talent, and now the goaltending to carry them to the top of professional hockey. In the 1974 playoffs, the Flyers swept by the Atlanta Flames in the opening round. They became the first expansion team to defeat one of the original 6 NHL clubs by eliminating the New York Rangers in the semifinals. The stage was now set for one of hockey's classic battles. 2 heavyweights, the Broad Street Bullies versus the Big Bad Bruins for the Stanley Cup. The Boston Garden, an arena full of NHL trophies and tradition. But for the Philadelphia Flyers, it had become a house of horrors. To win the Cup, the Flyers would have to take at least 1 game in this building, a feat they had not accomplished in almost 7 years.
Boston was a very tough rink to play in. Small ice surface. They were as big as we were. It was almost like a war.
Both teams went after each other with a vengeance, and as expected, Boston took Game 1. Game 2 was another all-out battle, and with the score tied at 2, the game slipped into overtime. The play moved towards one of the greatest moments in Flyers history.
Jones behind the net, centers, flat, tries to Clark, shot, oh, rebound, score! Clark scores for the game winner at 12 minutes and 1 second of sunset overtime.
For Flyers fans, Clark's dramatic game-winning goal and his spontaneous jump for joy will never be forgotten. The impossible victory stunned the Bruins and sent the Flyers back to Philadelphia with the 1 Garden win they needed. Throughout the playoffs, the Flyers had not lost a single game at home. In the next 2 games, they crushed Boston 4-1 and 4-2 to take a 3-1 series lead. The Bruins won Game 5 back at the Garden. And on Sunday, May 19th, needing 1 win to capture the Stanley Cup, the Flyers returned home for their appointment with destiny. As the Flyers took the ice, 17,000 adoring fans and 1 special lady were waiting to greet them. It remains as one of the most unlikely marriages in the history of sport. Kate Smith was the good luck charm for this renegade gang. The magic between this woman and the Flyers team had become legendary. With her song, the Flyers record was 36-3-1. And when she appeared before the pivotal 6th game, the Spectrum audience was overcome with emotion. The opening action was furious, the goaltending spectacular. Then, late in the first period, the Flyers broke through. Rick McLeish tipped in a shot by Moose DuPont, and the Flyers were up by 1. The precarious 1-goal lead held through the second and into the third period. It was clear that Bernie Parent was playing the game of his life.
The game was probably the greatest game I've ever seen. I mean, a 1-0 game. To shut out Bobby Orr, Esposito, and so forth would be unheard of in a crucial game, in my view. But the only reason it happened is that I think that Bernie Parent probably played the greatest game of goal I've ever seen.
I was numb at that time, you know, just, you know, especially the last 10 minutes of the game. I was so key, you know, on winning the game that I forgot. As a matter of fact, I forgot to get nervous.
The Bruins simply could not crack Parent's wall of defense. Frustration set in. And when Bobby Orr was penalized for grabbing Clark on a breakaway late in the game, Boston could come back no more. The Flyers have won the Stanley Cup. The words rang out like a cry of joy to a city starving for a champion. For Flyers owner Ed Snyder, his dream of bringing championship hockey to Philadelphia came true. Bernie Parent was awarded the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoffs' most valuable player. And as he and Bobby Clarke hoisted the precious Stanley Cup, they also lifted the pride of a city into the realm of a champion. The Stanley Cup coronation spread throughout Philadelphia, and in what was the greatest championship celebration in the history of sport. 2 million people jammed the streets of the city to cheer the victors in a glorious parade of heroes. Most of the champion Flyers grew up in small Canadian towns where they learned the game of hockey on frozen ponds. They would play for hours, even into the night. The romantic story of the Flyers' rise to the top of the NHL had captured the hearts of thousands of Delaware Valley kids and their families. This love affair could be seen in rinks that began to blossom throughout the tri-state area. This blue-collar town had adopted this hard-working hockey team as their very own. Back at the Spectrum, the Flyers prepared to defend their title. Many hockey writers called their championship a fluke. However, just 5 days after winning the Cup, GM Keith Allen plucked a diamond from the fading California Golden Seals in right winger Reggie Leach. Leach had been Clark's junior teammate in Flin Flon, and paired with Clark and Bill Barber, the three became known as the LCB line and quickly became the greatest scoring line in Flyers history.
We were champions because we had the toughness first. We had the strength in the middle. We had 5 great centermen. We had a sound defense, not fast, but sound, and we had the best goalie in the room.
For the second year in a row, Bernie Parent was by far the best goaltender in the league. Even his teammates marveled at the unflappable Parent.
The crazier Bernie was, the better he played. You know, they used to have that, stoppage of play, and you see Bernie bang his stick on the ice, and he called Joe and Eddie back, and the people are sitting up there saying, this is great. Bernie's, really going through some strategy. And Bernie would say, Ed, tonight I think I'm going to have 2 pieces of the pizza.
All you'd say to Bernie is, all right, Bernie, how many goals you need tonight? 1, 2. Never ever said more than 2. So in other words, give Bernie 2 goals and you won the game.
With Perrant in the net, the Flyers finished the 1975 season with the best record in the NHL and charged straight to the Stanley Cup Finals, where they would face the Buffalo Sabres for a chance at their 2nd consecutive championship. The Sabres, with the famed French Connection line, were hockey's highest scoring team. The Flyers, featuring Perrant and the league's toughest defense, were on a mission to answer the doubters. Having never won in Philadelphia, the Sabres added to their South Philly frustration by losing the first 2 games at the Spectrum.
I thought Bernie played better against Buffalo in the 2nd Cup than he played against Boston in the 1st Cup. Buffalo got close to anywhere between 36 and 40 shots in the first couple of games. They were a real faster skating team, and they moved the puck around extremely well.
It appeared that Buffalo would need a miracle to beat the Flyers. And in Game 3, they got one. With the Flyers up 2-0, an eerie fog blanketed the ice in the sweltering Buffalo arena. The action became surreal, with players skating in a cloud of intrigue and confusion. The Flyers couldn't keep track of the puck and lost both games 3-4. For the Flyers, Game 5 was a 5-1 romp at the Spectrum, but back in Buffalo for the 6th game, the attention once again turned to defense. Through 2 tense periods, neither team could score. Then, early in period 3, Shiro sent in Bob Kelly to get the Flyers untrapped.
Right wing, and he just flicks it to the right wing corner of the Buffalo zone. Kelly bumped behind the net by Korab. Kelly has it. Oh, but he scores! Bob Kelly for Kingston takes the kick, and the Flyers are on the board. It's 1-0.
Well, actually, the best part of scoring the goal was I got $5. And it sounds corny, but Freddie used to have, during practice, at the end of practice, he'd have you come out and score from behind the net. And, you have showdown amongst all your teammates, and whoever ultimately wins, Freddie would pay you $5. We were always happy. So when I scored the goal, I skated over, everybody's congratulating. I said, Freddie, that's $5 you owe me.
Minutes later, Orest Kindrachuk blocked a shot, and then, in true Flyer fashion, he took a fierce check into the boards in order to get the puck to Bill Clement on a breakaway. Philadelphia was on its way to a 2nd straight Stanley Cup.
Face-off won. It's all over. The Flyers have won their 2nd in a row. The Flyers have won their 2nd consecutive Stanley Cup. And the whole Flyers
The word fluke disappeared in the wake of another Flyers steamroll through the National Hockey League. Again, over 2 million would celebrate their beloved bullies.
The Philadelphia Flyer fans are the greatest hockey fans in the world. We have a hard-working team. They're hard-working people who pay to come and watch a hard-working team. So there's that bond that's kind of complements one another's lifestyle.
While Flyer fans shared in the joy of the 2 cups, the following year, for the 3rd season in a row, the eyes of the hockey world would focus on Philadelphia. In the winter of '76, almost every sports headline read, "The Russians are coming."
The hype and build-up from the media was unbelievable. the Soviet team is now going to face the best team, the Broad Street Bully team, and it kind of snowballed from there. And I remember the press conference here. I remember our players, and their players, and they were looking at us, and we were looking at them. And you guys are going to be in for the battle of your life.
I hated the Russians. I wanted to beat them so badly. I went through a big series in '72 with them, and I think it's easy to want to beat somebody when you hate them.
In a tour of NHL clubs, the Soviet Red Army team had not lost a single game. Now fans from around the world held their breath as the unbeatable Russians entered the NHL's Temple of Doom, the Spectrum, to face the league's reigning champions in a game for worldwide hockey supremacy. The Russians started their system of weaving and passing, trying to lure Philadelphia into a game of chase, but the Flyers would not follow. Fred Shero had told his players to stand up at the blue line and wait for the Russians to force the play. The Soviets became frustrated at their inability to penetrate the Flyers' zone. They also did not care for Philadelphia's physical style of play. And when Ed Van Impe checked Valery Kharlamov, the Russians had seen enough.
Full strength over the line on the right wing. Hole looking for a man up the slot. Kharlamov. It's come by Van Impe, but the Flyers are showing the wrong-footed spot.
Player went down to the ice, acting to a great extent, and the whistle was blown, and at that point the Russians left the ice. Just left, right in the middle of the game.
This is incredible. The Soviet Army team is going back to the locker room. They are leaving. They are walking out.
As a worldwide TV audience watched in disbelief, politics was being played out under the Spectrum seats.
Clarence Campbell and Alan and I went back and looked at the interpreter and said, if you don't come back on the ice, you don't get paid for the series. So he stared at us and he went back to mumble and talk to some of his people and came back and said, we'll go back on the ice.
The Russians finally returned to the ice, and just 17 seconds after play resumed, the Flyers officially welcomed them back.
Back to the point. Barber dumps it in on the score!
Before the end of the first period, Rick McLeish made it 2-0, and the outcome of hockey's superpower summit was all but decided.
We dominated them completely. I think we got 45 shots to their 13. I would say that's domination.
The final score read 4-1 Philadelphia. The overwhelming victory became the crowning achievement for Fred Shero and the Flyers. The two finest hockey teams on earth had come together to determine the world's best. And on this day, the Flyers proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were the greatest hockey team in the world. The Flyers' swashbuckling style had branded them renegades. Bobby Clarke was portrayed by some as Robin Hood, and the Spectrum had become Sherwood Forest. The league's tough guys came and left with tales of horror. Some games were won even before the puck was dropped.
For all those players in those years that got to experience the Spectrum against the Broad Street Bullies, I mean, that's something they can talk about, because it would have been a scary experience.
It seemed like everybody would be happy-go-lucky on the way down to Philly, and as soon as you get on that bridge and you could see the Spectrum, all the smiles came off your face, and you really started getting serious. The stomach started to quease a little bit.
I believe that some of us were intimidated by their rough type of play. You know, it was like a real tremendous sacrifice to come in this building.
The legend of the Broad Street Bullies' domination had spread across the globe.
He says, first of all, of course, we didn't like that game because the Flyers came on the ice and played hard hockey, rude hockey even. And this is the thing that we really didn't like.
Throughout the rest of the 70s, the orange and black became the game's most intimidating colors. The incomparable Bobby Clarke won his third Hart Trophy as the league's MVP. And together with Barber and Leach, the LCB line set an NHL record for goals in a season. No team would outwork, out-hit, or out-hustle the hard-charging pride of Philadelphia. While other teams spoke of a work ethic, this team lived it. The Flyers had become the envy of the NHL. The end of the 70s brought both the best and the worst of times for the Flyers. All-star defenseman Barry Ashby passed away after a bout with leukemia. Bernie Parent was forced to retire following an eye injury. And when Fred Shero left to coach the Rangers, many thought that the golden era of Flyers hockey was over.
Top of the circle, throw it at the net points. You're not going to deke anybody there. Holy, what's going on, Wally? Go, Tom, go hard.
Enter new head coach Pat Quinn. Brought up from the Maine Mariners to guide this team through a rebuilding period, Quinn chose instead to lead it into a new era of excellence. The Flyers began the 1979-80 season by splitting their first two games. Then, starting with the third game, the team began an unprecedented march through the NHL that would end in the rewriting of sports history. This team would not lose another game for almost 3 months. The cast featured Captain Mel Bridgman, a solid bank of veterans, and young talent like Kenny Linsman, and forward Paul Holmgren. A rookie goaltender, and a defense featuring names like Barnes, Busniak, and Bathe.
These players had won at the minor league level. Some of them had some NHL experience. They were players who knew what it took to win.
And winning is what they did best. From October to January, from Montreal to Los Angeles, this team never lost. As their undefeated streak grew, so did the pressure and the media attention. The record for most consecutive games without a loss was 28. And on December 19th, the Flyers tied the Pittsburgh Penguins and the record. Next up was Boston. For this team to take a step into hockey history, it would have to beat the Bruins in Boston Garden. There was a playoff atmosphere that day as a sold-out audience came to see the streak come to an end. But this game was no contest. The Flyers dominated from start to finish, winning 5-2 and shattering the NHL record. But the streak would not end here. It would go on for an incredible 84 days, an unbelievable 35 games without a loss. The magnificent record still stands today as the longest undefeated streak of any team in the history of professional sports in North America. With by far the best record in the NHL, the Flyers met the New York Islanders in one of the strangest Stanley Cup finals ever. After 5 games, the Flyers were down 3 games to 2. Then in Game 6, 2 controversial calls put the Flyers in the hole. First, Dennis Potvin appeared to raise his stick above his shoulders to knock in the Islanders' first goal. Despite the objections of the Flyers, the goal was allowed to stand. Then, just minutes later, in one of the biggest non-calls in Stanley Cup history, the Islanders' Clark Gillies was offside by 3 feet when he passed back over the blue line. The offside was so obvious, the Flyers relaxed, and the Islanders scored.
I was so upset in that game, I couldn't see straight. I could hardly talk for a week. I mean, the offsides call was so blatant. I've never seen anything like it before or since in a regular game, much less a Stanley Cup final game.
Despite the controversy, the Flyers came back to tie the game, but finally fell short in overtime. Had this game been won by Philadelphia, many believed that the Flyers would have taken Game 7 back at the Spectrum and the series.
I'm still bitter about some things that happened as far as the officiating were concerned, but the guys in that room should have perhaps had a Stanley Cup ring instead of the guys in the Islanders' room.
It was, to be sure, a disappointing finish to a miraculous season, one that will always be remembered as the year of the streak. Throughout the history of this franchise, one player has come to epitomize the effort and excellence of the Flyers organization more than any other. His name, Bobby Clarke.
I believe Bobby is like a dream dressed in work clothes. I don't think there's an athlete ever that I've ever seen in any sport who worked as hard as Bobby Clarke.
Well, that's an inner strength that Clarke had that really separated him from a lot of players. And so if you were a teammate and you didn't work like he worked, I think you should be embarrassed.
Bobby Clarke was born in the hinterlands of northern Canada, in a mining town called Flin Flon. There he learned the value of a hard-working lifestyle from his father.
He was a working man, and he believed that you get nothing for nothing. And he always told me that a man has to work, and you had to get a job. And when you get a job, you work your hardest at doing it, and you be loyal to the people you work for. I mean, it was very simple, and it was the way he was about his job and the way he expected me to be about mine.
The labor paid off for Clarke in the form of 2 Stanley Cups and 3 Hart trophies during his shining career. If one moment could capture the essence of Clarke, it would be a game in which he was hit in the head by a Reggie Leach slap shot. Bloodied and in pain, he did not miss a shift, and later in the game scored the 1,000th point of his career.
So it's Clarke with it, with a wrist shot, another one, score! Bobby Clarke with his 1,000th point.
He is the Flyers' all-time scoring leader, and in many ways, this man and this team were a match made in heaven.
In a lot of ways, I lucked out by coming to the Flyers because the Flyers believed in winning every night. And we had a lot of teams that we played against over the years that really didn't play that hard against us. And I used to look at them and just think, thank heavens I'm not over there. Because we had a group of people and we had an organization that every night wanted to win. For me, it was perfect.
He was the team's heart and soul, the ultimate Flyer. But all things must come to an end. And in 1984, Bobby Clarke, the player, retired. And thus began a new chapter of Flyers history.
I'm extremely happy to announce that Bobby Clarke has agreed to become Vice President and General Manager of the Philadelphia Flyers.
The appointment of Clark as general manager was a clear signal of the club's dramatic turn to youth. The 84-85 Flyers were the youngest team in professional sports. Brash and spirited, they stormed through their NHL schedule as if crashing a dance on a Saturday night.
It was like a teenage squad. It was pretty funny with myself, Pete Zezel, Derek Smith, Murray Craven, Ronnie Sutter. It was a young club.
We couldn't really grow anywhere in the first couple of months because we were too young to drink or too young to go out to a bar or things like that. And we tried to rent a car and we couldn't do anything like that.
With 10 players under the age of 22, they were dubbed the Broad Street Babies. GM Clark chose a stern headmaster for their coach. Mike Keenan would teach this team how to win in the NHL.
Let's go, let's go, let's go. Hurry up. Right there, Timmy Body. Center, talking.
Keenan's kids responded by winning 53 games that year, more than any Flyer club in history. Game after game, their confidence grew. 54-goal scorer Tim Kerr led the way on offense. All-star Mark Howe anchored the defense. In goal, a sensational Swede, Pelle Lindberg, rekindled the Flyers' tradition of superior goaltending.
He was instrumental in the growth of that team because he let us be better than we were. Maybe we weren't that good, but he'd go out and stand on his head and he'd make us that good. And maybe he'd win a 1-0 game against the Islanders or a 2-1 game in Montreal. And he really allowed us to grow confidence-wise as a group.
The Flyers' young guns shocked everyone by finishing with the best record in the league. And for the first time in 4 years, Philadelphia made it past the first round of the playoffs. Then, against the Quebec Nordique in the semifinals, the Flyers found themselves in the crucial 6th game shorthanded by 2 men and clinging precariously to a 1-goal lead. Captain Dave Poulin will never forget the dramatic play that followed.
Stosny right on to the left side to Marois. Back to Stosny. Short-handed breakaway by Dave Poulin. He's going right on in. Shoot! Score!
If somebody asked me what's the greatest goal that you've scored or what's the greatest moment that you remember, it was that goal. I had a breakaway for literally 3/4 of the ice, which is way too much time to think. And all series we've been preaching on Gosselin to shoot high, shoot high, shoot high. And I got into about the tops of the circles and just beat him over the top of the glove. And coming around that corner, I can remember the noise and the reverberations in the Spectrum were unbelievable.
Dave Poulin's incredible short-handed goal launched the Flyers into the Stanley Cup Finals for the 5th time in club history. The defending champion Edmonton Oilers won the series, but the new-look Flyers had left their mark on the NHL. After the season, in an emotional scene, goalie Pelle Lindberg was awarded the Vezina Trophy as the league's best goalie. His goaltender coach and mentor, Bernie Perront, made the presentation.
First of all, I want to thank my teammates. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. But the man I really want to thank tonight is the guy standing to the left of me, Bernie Perront. He told me everything I know about to play about hockey in America. Thank you, Bernie.
Just months after the greatest moment in the young phenom's life, Pelle Lindberg was dead, killed in a tragic car crash that devastated the Flyers' family.
I think the lesson it taught us all about that, too, is how fast things can change. I mean, things obviously came to a crashing halt, and yet we went on, and we succeeded.
The club picked up the pieces and forged on. Number 12, Tim Kerr, was quietly becoming an NHL scoring machine. He pumped in 50 or more goals in 4 consecutive years. In 1986, the Flyers found an heir to the Perrant-Lindbergh legacy when Mike Keenan entrusted the starting goaltending job to rookie Ron Hextall. The tall, fiery goalie was an overnight success. He stoned the Edmonton Oilers in his very first game. And while the Spectrum crowd quickly adopted him as their own, Ron Hextall was not always a Flyer fan himself.
Well, I wish I could say I was, but I wasn't. I admired the way they played, and I admired the success they had, but they used to beat up on my dad's team, so I wasn't real fond of them. I bought that book. I think it was Bobby Clark and the Ferocious Flyers. I bought that book. Wasn't a fan, but I admired the way they played.
The hockey world had never seen a goalie quite like Ron Hextall. He would go on to become the first goaltender ever to shoot and score a goal in the NHL.
Bruins come back, flip it from their side of center in on Hextall. He blocks, looks to shoot it to the open net. He has scored! Ron Hextall has become the first player in the history of the National Hockey League, the first goaltender to actually score a goal.
Just his whole personality added excitement because he was so controversial, and it was fun. I mean, the bad guys were bad again.
Bad boy Ron Hextall turned the NHL upside down. He played each game on the emotional edge. Riding the confidence of their newfound hero, the club soared all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Well, he was the reason we were, first of all, in the finals. Our team, again, was hurt badly during the playoffs as far as injuries were concerned, but he was really the driving force behind the club during those playoffs, and it was his play that made it possible for us, I believe, to reach the Stanley Cup Finals.
Once again, the Flyers would be overwhelming underdogs to the star-studded Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Finals. Philadelphia lost 2 tight games in Edmonton and then fell behind 3-0 in Game 3. They were without leading scorer Tim Kerr, and hockey experts everywhere left them for dead. But this Flyers team would never say die. In one of the most stunning comebacks in Stanley Cup history, the Cinderella Flyers scored 5 unanswered goals to steal the game and shock the mighty Oilers. The team split games 4 and 5, and in game 6, now facing elimination, the Flyers again found themselves down by a goal with time running out.
Off to the point, into the corner to Eklund, straight out in front to Prop. Shot, score!
Brian Propp's goal tied the game, and the Spectrum was insane. Less than 2 minutes later, with Flyers fans still in a frenzy, J.J. Daigneault lit the fuse, and the Spectrum exploded.
Trying to find Prop again. The Oilers to the point. Daigneault's up.
Boy, I'll tell you, these people are going crazy.
I never heard a billion like that in my life. It was like, you know, putting your finger in a light socket. Your whole body just went numb. Guys on the bench were losing it.
Incredibly, the injury-riddled Flyers had come from behind again to defeat the Oilers and force a 7th game back in Edmonton. Game 7 was a showcase for the brilliant Ron Hextall, as he kept the Flyers close until the game's final minutes.
I mean, let's face it, Edmonton had twice as much talent as we had, and yet we took them to the last couple minutes of the 7th game. So, you know, when you look at that and you look at both teams on paper, I think it's fair to say that we were certainly had a lot more desire than any team in the league that year.
In the end, a shaken Edmonton team triumphed. But for all those who witnessed this series, Philadelphia's heroic performance won their hearts. Hextall was named the series MVP, and the Flyers had once again covered themselves in glory. Despite his success, after 4 years, Mike Keenan's abrasive style had lost its effectiveness on the team. Finally, after a disappointing first-round playoff elimination in 1988, Bobby Clarke dismissed Mike Keenan and named former Flyer Paul Holmgren as head coach. Holmgren's positive approach paid off early. In his very first season, he guided the team to another Patrick Division playoff championship and into the Stanley Cup semifinals. Rick Tocchet had now emerged to become a legitimate NHL All-Star. Once known primarily as one of the fiercest fighters in the game when challenged, Tocchet recognized the team's need for goals and became the club's leading scorer. Goaltender Ron Hextall continued his extraordinary play, and in the opening round of the 1989 playoffs, he took another shot at NHL history.
Scott Stevens up the middle for the Capitals. A wraparound. There goes Peters for the net. Capitals. Now Hextall shoots it to the open net. He's gone right on. He scored! Hextall! Hextall, the first goaltender ever to score a goal in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
It was probably a better goal. It was a harder goal to score because this time Stevens wrapped around the boards hard, and I had to pick it up off the boards, turn, and then shoot. So it was I mean, it sounds stupid, but it was a more skilled goal. It's more of a goal scorer's goal, that's what it was.
Hextall's historic goal marked another great moment in the Flyers' glorious journey. The Flyers franchise continues to be winners off the ice as well. The entire organization shares in the annual family fun of the Flyers Wives Carnival. Carried on in Barry Ashby's memory, the event has become a celebration of his life and has blossomed to raise nearly $5 million in 15 years for cancer and blood disease research. The winds of change blew through the Spectrum in the summer of 1990, when club president Jay Snyder announced the most difficult decision of his life.
This afternoon, I met with Bob Clarke and relieved him of his duties as general manager of the Flyers. I looked up to him as a youngster, as an idol, and I still look up to him as a person. But I had to look at the overall picture, and I didn't like what the picture showed, and Bob and I were not able to resolve how to move forward.
The change opened the door to a bold new age of growth and development. New general manager Russ Farwell has proclaimed his vision of the future with a solid commitment to speed and youth.
Speed can be just as big an intimidator as any kind of physical play. I think the game's changing. I think you got to keep up in order to play, and I think those things are positive. You just have to keep up with that. But if you're not prepared to go that way, I think you could be left behind.
As the Flyers burst into the 90s, there is a new excitement in the air. They are a club still rooted in hard work, but now dedicated to even greater skills and speed. The past shall be their guiding light into the future, a past filled with heroes. Hockey's Hall of Fame. By 1991, there were 5 members from the expansion teams enshrined here. 4 were from the Philadelphia Flyers. Their legend lives on in this scripture and in the memories of all who witnessed their gifts. The torch has been passed to a new generation of Flyer. The glorious journey continues. The pride and tradition lives on.
Flyers, Philadelphia Flyers, here's to you, to the hopes and dreams you made come true. Where you're on, you fought right to the end, with a spirit that's burning bright. Hear the roar of the crowd's delight. Share with you, all coming from the heart, so proud to be a part of it. Those precious moments, all our dreams come true. We laughed and cried through the years, through the joy and the blood, sweat and tears with you. Flyers, Flyers, our family. You're the team that stands above all the rest. In our hearts, the ones that are best of all. It's a wonderful truth